420, 420, for 20 long years. I smoked lots of reefer and drank lots of beer. Every day at 420, we're going to settle this score. And for 20 long years, it's been 20 past 4.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to 420 Live. I am your host, Jeff Kravitz. It is the Tuesday edition. We are rolling into November, the 8th month of our pandemic. We're going to celebrate. I don't know, is it a celebration? It's like, I guess it's kind of like in Papillon when they're chalking off the days on the wall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're marking her times in this limbo, this crazy. Isn't the world crazy? I mean, is it hard to fathom that the biggest baby in the world is sitting there denying the fact that he lost the election to the biggest margin ever? They're still not even done counting ballots. You have 4 million ballots left in California, still counting everywhere. But we need to certify those ballots and get him in because it looks like he's fired the entire Defense Department. I don't want to say there's a coup going on, but there's a coup going on. And there's a cuckoo at the top of the coup, making things difficult for us, throwing us under the bus. Like, it's so easy. Like, I saw Pompeo today. I'm sure everybody's seen this. I know we're all seeing the same garbage fed to us each day. How they're transitioning to a second term for Trump. And then people are like, this guy went to West Point. I mean, it's not like doesn't know what freedom and what our life is about. And it's frustrating, folks. You know it. You're all seeing it out there every day. And as you know, we come here Monday to Friday at 4:20 p.m. as a means of distraction, as a means to take you away from all this kind of nonsense that's going on in our world, and concentrate on what's important, which is being with each other and communicating and talking and, talking to our friends. Yesterday, we talked to Neil Cohen. I had my first cocktail on the air and 171 shows, which is kind of amazing if you think about it. But I just, alcohol's not my thing. I think I've smoked close to a pound of weed on the air, but I have not, no, not that much. Actually, I'm just getting back into smoking on air. I find it relaxes me a lot more than my guests. And, the oil pen is probably the best invention ever because it's not messy or fussy. And the 710 Labs pen that I'm using right here, delicious. I'm plugging all my frame and lens glasses, my God Boner shirt from my umps crew, get my umps wear. If you want me to wear your band shirt on the air, just shoot it to me here. I'm an extra large. Getting all that oil got me parched. Anyway, as the world falls apart, as America goes into the revolution, we're going to be here together. We're going to talk it out. Today, in a couple minutes, we're going to get to our guest, Benjy Eisen. I don't really have to introduce Benjy to my audience. Everybody's seen Benjy around for years. I was trying to think today, like the first time I saw him, he was probably like a punk teenager at a Fish show when I was back there shooting. We'll get into that in a minute. But anyway, if you're watching the revolution, if you're tuning in, it's hard to make heads or tails of what's going on out there and what to believe. But believe this, folks. There's a new president coming in on January 20th. He's going to take his seat. And all this is a distraction, and it is a way to, erode our political system for one man. I mean, can you believe everybody just laying it down for this one guy? Like Donald Trump's the be all end all. We have to protect him. Protect the king. Protect the king, master. We must protect the king. The Gooch is in the house. Kenny Gatunia, my old grade school chum. Gee, we go back a long time. Dang. Kenny, what a world, huh? What a life. How's everything at the dog? He's at Water Dog there in Ventnor, which has taken over the food scene. My friend Jeff Chabro is raving about the Water Dog. I mean, he's got the sweatshirt. He's in there all the time. I was like, make sure you try the Gooch. Say hi to Kenny. I don't know if Jeff said hi to you yet, but he's in there all the time. Loving it. All my friends out there in the Jersey Shore. Hello, everybody out there. Hello. You guys ready? We got Benjy coming on right now. Say hi. Benjy Eisen.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Jeff, how's it going, man?
Good. You can hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah,
Oh, good.
It's a world of difference.
Yeah, it's amazing. I kind of think that Mercury retrograde, I've been blaming all my tech shit on Mercury retrograde, but now I think it's just because I'm an old stoner, and that's why everything breaks.
Well, for me, there's a part of that. There's also, I got this new microphone that's awesome and rocking my world, but it's weird. It's like supposed to be plug and play, and instead
the problem is that these microphones are speakers as well as mics. So if you have it set for both, that's where the
speaker of the house right here.
We figured that out with seconds to go, by the way, Ben.
Yeah, I know we did. I love to play it down to the wire. That's the way I do it.
Yeah, you've always want wild and loose. And now I'm trying to think. What was your first
seat of the pants?
What was your first fish show?
My first fish show was New Year's Eve, which is a great first fish show experience, no matter what year it is. But it was New Year's Eve, 1993.
Okay, so I'm trying to think when I met you, and I remembered seeing you around before you even started all the writing and everything like that.
I remember that too. I don't have a first time met or a first time, introduced. I have when I think about our history and going back. One of the things that at this point, this was over 10 years ago. I already knew you. We're already friends, but I was at Bonnaroo with my friend at the time, my girlfriend, now a very close friend of mine, Allie Cook. And we were embarrassingly enough riding the rails for Fish. It was the Springsteen set, and I heard that Springsteen was going to sit in, and I is one of the very few times in my life that I rode the rails, at least in my post-teen years that I rode the rails. But sure enough, we were riding the rails. You took a snapshot of us. I remember talking to you when you were in the pit, and I was like, "Hey, Jeff," and it was for some other reason. Maybe I was passing you something, a vapor, pre-vape or joint or whatever it was. But you turned around, you took the snapshot, and then months later, it was in Rolling Stone, and it was also in Bloomberg. It was in some business magazine as well. And the shot has showed up, numerous places, but it was really funny, almost embarrassing, because it was the one time that I've been in Rolling Stone, as a writer so many times that to be in there as a fan photo was almost, towing the line, but it's cool. You got to walk the walk.
Well, when did you start writing for Rolling Stone?
So that happened because I was editor at AOL Music, and
I remember AOL Music.
Yeah, so I was the West Coast deputy editor. So in the afternoons, it was a 24-hour operation that went around the world. So they'd hand at 3 p.m. My time in California, 6 p.m. New York time. They'd hand the keys over to me. So I had to. So even if it was the evening and I went out, I was on call if Wayne Coyne got arrested for some stupid reason or whatever, I'd have to immediately, do it up. And it was the people don't remember AOL Music as much as the blogs. It was Spinner was the main gig, and then it was we had one for heavy metal, we had one for country, for hip hop, and then AOL Music blog was the big dump where we would put all the Lady Gaga stuff.
Yeah, well, AOL was the first. It was my first social media experience.
Yeah. For many people, it's funny. I didn't even have.
Well, maybe was MySpace before that or after that?
MySpace was
after that, right?
Yeah, maybe after that. Kind of concurrent. Everyone remembered getting the AOL, CDs in the mail, and you dial up the internet. But by the time that I was editor there, I didn't have an AOL account when I worked for them. Even my email for them was not at AOL. I don't remember that. No, it wasn't. It was, I had a Comcast account. So, so there you go. But anyway, so AOL Music kind of shifted, and Huffington Post merged with them, and there were a lot of changes going on. And part of that was they kind of shut down the whole music department. And when they did that, my bosses at AOL shifted to Rolling Stone online. They pivoted. and almost the entire office kind of just went with them. And so I got swept up in that. And I had maybe 2 weeks of downtime, and then before I knew it, the same people that I was working for AOL were calling me up asking me to commit to South by Southwest and other things pretty fast for Rolling Stone right after that.
And Rolling Stone was kind of like the big dog. That was kind of like the gold standard.
Well, I promised myself when I was 16 years old, I never wanted to write about music. I wanted to write, but not about music. And I promised myself when I was 16 that I would quit if I hit 2 things. If I worked for Rolling Stone and if I interviewed Bon Jovi. And then I interviewed, because when I was 13, I loved Bon Jovi. And then I interviewed Richie Sambora for Rolling Stone, and he tweeted about it. And that's when I was like, okay, cool, I'm done. I'm out. And that right around that time was when Bill Kreutzman kind of cherry picked me and was like, yoinked me away. And I haven't looked back since. So
well, Kreutzman, you ended up, didn't that start off as you wrote a feature for Rolling Stone, and that's how you guys met?
Yeah, that's funny you remember that. I wrote a feature for Rolling Stone, but it was on Jam Cruise, and I was there for 2 reasons besides like the fun and besides I loved Jam Cruise and Cloud9 and that whole thing. But the professional reason I was there was to interview Kreutzman and to interview and with Billy, the interview was somebody who was there with Sven Walters, and as I'd interviewed him before for Rolling Stone on the phone and also for AOL, and we kind of had this natural rhythm, and we hit it off. So he immediately said he remembered my energy, but then he asked me to find drugs for him, and before we knew it, we kind of bonded. And we partied and we had this feature that got a lot of traction. It wasn't supposed to be controversial, and at the time I didn't realize what I was sitting on. But when it published on Rolling Stone, it was he said that it was his belief that had Jerry Garcia lived, that he may have broken up the Grateful Dead, or else they either were going to break up or take a hiatus, and that. There's no in classic Grateful Dead style. Billy and Jerry never had a conversation about it. That was just the feeling that Billy got. He knew that at least Jerry had a lot of stuff planned for his own solo band. He knew that Jerry at least wanted to take a break. They may have called it a hiatus. They may have broken up, but who knows what would have happened. But they wouldn't have kept the status quo, was what Billy was getting at. And of course,
don't they blame themselves for not doing that earlier for Jerry?
They do, and it's funny because Deadheads immediately, the response was incredible. It was Deadheads were angry and pissed off at Billy for saying that, oh no, you're saying that Jerry's going to possibly break up our band. This goes back to a conversation I was having with one of my best friends the other day about, when Fish broke up, I was, as much as I was as sad to see this thing that I love so much, end, I never was angry about it or questioned Trey, because at some point it's your career or your life, and it was like and even if it wasn't that stark, I wouldn't have wanted to see a band where I knew that the musicians didn't want to be there and they were only doing it because it was work and they hated it. Because then how can you, that's like having sex with somebody who doesn't like you.
I think that there has to be a constant analysis and reboot, and we all know about the left nut where Trey said, I'd give my left nut when he was sitting in prison. I'd give my left nut to be able to play You Enjoy Myself. Pissed all over You Enjoy Myself before, because let's face it, it's all fun and games when people are starting their musical careers in the beginning, before you get famous. It's an incredible energy amongst you and your fellow musicians. It's very exciting. When you watch Long Strange Trip, the first half of it is the most joyous thing you've ever seen about music and about life and about exploration and drugs and, everybody having a good time. But the second half, when everything goes dark, when the success rolls in and the money and the drugs and the constant attention, that's the dark part. And that's the part that people have a hard time handling. You've seen a lot of musical careers in your life. It's hard to handle it.
You start out best friends and then you end up a business, and some bands have figured out how to stay a business and be able to be on stage with each other and have it be honest and have them make great music. And then when they walk off stage, they go off into their separate lives, but you start off, I mean, when I was 13, 14, I'm sure this is the case for every little, every young music fan. You want to think of your bands as best friends, as like a gang of buddies. And I think
that's what it is. It's the guys in your neighborhood. When I interviewed George Porter, and he talked about Zig, and they were 8 years old playing on pots and pans in the kitchen, and the same thing with drama. All these different artists I've talked to over the past 6 or 7 months that started off as such good friends because they lived close to each other or whatever,
or they live together. They live in a band house, and right. A lot of that's out of necessity. But you start off with any enterprise. You start off loving the people that you do it with. But then, 20, 30, 40 years later, you're with the same kids you were with in college. Your worldviews have developed individually. So you might be going different ways, and your personalities, and you have wives, you have kids, you have the whole thing, and you don't necessarily want to be in a room with the same 4 people that you were with in college dorms, 30, 40 years later down the line, making important business decisions. And that's why when these bands get on stage, and there's bands that I'm not talking about the big 2 that we've been talking about, but there's other bands in the scene that I know where, they get on stage, they're not friends, but they are able to get on stage and have everything that, like, Trey is when he's on stage. He's playing In Fish is his escape from it. He said this right before they broke up, of having these long 8-hour deliberations over for the album cover. Do we do this photo or that? And his escape from it is when he's on stage getting to play music. And I think that's the case with a lot of these bands. They might not be friends off stage.
Okay, what you're saying is a totally pre-pandemic argument, and now that these bands have been forced into retirement for a year. When I talked to the Humphreys guys, with the God Boner shirt, but when I talked to the Humphreys guys, it was interesting to talk about. They were actually happy to see each other, probably for the first time in a decade, when they walked in and they're like, oh my God, I'm so happy to see Jake. I'm so happy to see Ryan, because the guys were forced into separation, and it's happened to every band. So now every band's had a chance to analyze what the other guys mean to them, how important it is to be a band, how important it is to make the music they make. And I think that coming at it from this viewpoint, that now I think when we get back to the music, all these guys that you're talking about that have been, I don't like being married to this guy, and he stinks, and I don't like to hear him snore on the bus or whatever it is, are all like, holy shit, let's get on the road and rock it out.
I think that, our artists are supposed to kind of be mirrors and supposed to kind of, be headlamps for where we are culturally. And I think that everybody has experienced that. I certainly, in the very beginning of lockdown, when you started the show, that same period of time was when I was reaching out and hearing from people that pre-pandemic, I would have, it took the pandemic for me to realize, hey, this person does matter to me. These friends do matter to me. I'm horrible at keeping in touch. Life goes by so incredibly fast, faster than, it's such a cliche. And we hear when you're a kid, you hear old people say that all the time, like, enjoy now, but it's so true. And it goes by in the blink of an eye, and it's just a blur. And it's times when we need to stop and pause, that all of a sudden you're hearing from friends that are important to you, and you're able to take a second to be like, you know what, this is important. Like, this is great. And I was doing Zooms with people and texting with friends that I hadn't for a while, that not that I thought that, maybe our worldviews had changed, and maybe, old friends of mine were in very different spots in life. We might, have nothing in common anymore other than the time that we spent together. But suddenly we were able to cherish that and to nourish it in a way, and to become, to keep the friendship. So I think that's what you're saying on stage as well as off.
Well, you're right. We've all had to figure out what's important and how to stay in touch with the people that are close to us. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed. They're like, yeah, now I'm an expert at Zoom, and I'm an expert at talking to people online, and I'm texting, and I'm reaching out. And I'm talking I found myself talking on the phone a lot more to people.
Yeah,
people and
exactly. That too. I got calls. I mean, I remember Andy Bernstein called me, and Andy and I, for those who don't know, the 3 people out there that don't know, he's Andy Bernstein's involved with Headcount. Before that, he's the CEO of Headcount. Before that, he was with the Farmer's Almanac, and before that, he was working at a sports desk in New York City, giving me free fish tickets. And I've known him since we were in our. I've known him since before we were allowed to legally drink, but he called me. And I remember looking at the phone, and it was like an awkward moment for me. I was like right about to cook dinner or something, and I just remember thinking, I better answer this because it has to be important. And I pick it up, and he's like, "Yeah, man." He's like, "How's it going?" I was like, "What's up?" And he goes, "Just catching up. How's it going?" And I was like, "You don't need anything. You don't want anything. You need Billy to sign something." And he's like, "No, I'm just catching up." And I was like, "Oh, awesome, cool. Like, let's catch up. How's it going?" And it had been a while since I had those phone calls.
Yeah. I found
nice.
out with a lot of people because listen, we would see each other. I would have seen you 6 to 8 times over the past 6 months, 7 months.
We would have seen each other every weekend at a different festival in a different state, and we would have seen each other. That's right.
And now that's all stopped, and now we're stuck on this online world. Which let's face it, we are circling our wagons. Have you gotten anything done that's been sitting in? You got any empty boxes you're still emptying, or you got everything settled?
Oh, I've got a lot. Everyone pivoted, and my pivots I use the like the whole throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And a lot of these pivots that I got really behind have been postponed, or like one thing or another that aren't all of which I'm excited about. The quarter that does work out will be great. But I've been keeping busy doing that, and you're talking about boxes. I've gone through everything in my life, still going through a lot, going through like boxes, literally physical boxes of stuff. And I'm moving, so there's that. Just nothing big, just moving to a house about an hour north of the city. So I've been consumed with boxes lately and stuff like that.
Your life in boxes.
You won't find moments in a box. Before we get too far off, I wanted to backtrack for 1 second. You mentioned the movie, the Grateful Dead movie, Long Strange Trip, and I just had a really funny little pop-up video fact about it. So when they started filming it, they came out to Hawaii to do the interview with Billy, and that's right at the time I started managing him, where I was pivoting from being his writer. We had the book in the can. We were, that very week that they filmed his interviews, we were reading the semifinal draft. We sat down. What happened? So the film crew was coming out, and Billy's house at that time, not anymore, but at that time, was a bachelor's house in Hawaii. Like, even though he was married and all that, like, he still was living in this house that is like, where you'd have the guys over for a card game, but not where like a rock star, let alone like an American icon, necessarily lives. And so he was like, where are we going to film it? Where's a good space for it? And so, I like I said, I just had started managing him, and it was one of my very first, things to deal with. And I said, well, let's rent a house. So we rented this house that allegedly Pierce Bronson may have had some history with, because he lives right in that neighborhood. We rented this house of like 5-10 miles north of where Billy's actual house is to film the interview. And we had the house for the whole week. And that's where we sat down and we read through the final pages of Deal before sending it off to the publisher. But I remember when they filmed that movie, and in the living room there, and Billy, you talked about the lightness of the beginning. Billy cried, and they caught some of that on camera, I think, but a lot of it was off camera. As soon as they stopped rolling, Billy was just short of all out weeping when he was talking about Jerry. It was I'll never forget it, because it was so sincere. Because during the book I experienced it a lot during the writing, but with the cameras on him, to have him have to take moments, it was really moving.
Well, I mean, whenever you talk about someone that you're close to that you've lost, it brings up emotion, right? If I start talking about any of my family members on the show, next thing I know, I'm choked up. And can you imagine a guy they've known each other for 50 some odd years? Those guys have been together.
Yep.
Or not even. Well, Jerry died at 53, so 45 years, right? They met when they were like 18 years old.
Yep.
Absolutely 18. Crazy.
Can you imagine being in the? This is how I often think about this with Billy. And now, I'm obviously really close with him. Worked with him. No, I joked with him that I know more about him than any of his ex-wives. But can you imagine being 18 years old and being, all of a sudden from the time you're 18 on, like that year, people started coming up to him saying, "You changed my life." Like that very first year when they were playing the acid tests. People were saying, "Oh my God, like this is," and he's had that since when he was 18. He had a lot on his plate. He was married, had a kid, had his own apartment, was teaching, was working at a wig store selling wigs and teaching drum lessons, and in high school, and going down to Haight-Ashbury, and starting the Grateful Dead all at once. And then immediately from that, by the time he was 19, from the time he was 19 to this very day, he's had everyone that's around him be like, almost treat him differently, and he's had that he's been a rock star since before his brain even fully developed.
Well, and in the middle of brain development, these guys are experimenting with one of the strongest, most revolutionary chemicals to ever come across the plate. And we're also distributing at their shows to help pay for their equipment and food and rentals. And
they were funded by the LSD millionaire.
But then I heard the stories in the old books about Phil being in the parking lot before the show, handing out the orange sunshine to everybody. I mean, it's just classic history that has created our present. This past is what has created the whole scene that we love so much. Is all based on what these guys did in the early days. And I can't imagine like trying to wrap your head around this chemical. I've been partying with it for 40 years. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around it. I'm sure the same thing with you. It's always evolving and changing. I've done so many. I've never had one chemical be like, this is this. And then you do it. And it's different. Each one is different. There's not different strains like there is with cannabis, but there's different personalities, I guess.
Well, so when I first, and like I said, now the way that I think of Billy, I alternate between thinking of him as my boss, was one of my closest friends, as a father figure sometimes, just basically due to the age difference, But I remember at the very beginning when I didn't know him that well, and I had flown out to Hawaii, like I got the gig working, doing his biography with him, and that was cool enough in itself. And I fly out to Hawaii, and I remember at the time, now it's funny because it's so like, but at the time I remember even going up to his gate with the gate code and being like, I have Bill Kreutzman's gate code, like all these little things that like, back then just seemed so big. And I remember the very first few weeks that we were working on the book, we were talking about the Grateful Dead's history. So obviously we're talking about the acid tests a lot. And he didn't know me that well, and I didn't know him that well. Now he knows me better than any of my ex-girlfriends. He knows my whole life story, and he retains it all too, which is crazy. But at the time we didn't know this. We were still just figuring out the dynamic even. I would come over to his place and start interviewing him. We would light a joint, we would open up a bottle of wine, I'd take out the tape recorder, and we just would go, but there still was this, like professional relationship, and what breaks down those barriers better than psychedelics, right? But at the time, it wasn't even that thinking; it was purely selfish, and that I was hearing him talk about these acid tests all the time, and I'm in Hawaii, this beautiful place, and I was just like, so I start asking him, I go, do you still partake? And he's like, of course. And I go, can we? And he's like, sure. And then he'd make excuses. I'd be like, let's do it tomorrow. Let's do this. And so after, a couple of weeks of this, I decide, I didn't know at the time if anyone ever gives him shit or, if everyone's just yes men around him and kissing. So I go, I don't think you've ever taken acid. I think it's all one big sham. I was like, you say you still do. And every day you're making excuses not to. And I was like, whatever. And he goes, okay, buddy. He's like, listen, tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., get your ass here. We're going on a hike. And he goes, and I have some of this stuff that I have from this guy named Owsley. So, be ready. So I was like, this is great. I went home. I couldn't sleep that night. I was like, tomorrow I'm going to get spun with Bill Kreutzman, blah, blah, blah. And the next day comes, we drive up, it's an hour drive to the hike that he had in mind, it was the perfect, most amazing scenic place. The place that I kind of wish was my first acid trip when I was 16, like just this, you can't come up with scenery like this. Jurassic Park, that type of scenery. And we're on the drive up there, and we get halfway up, and he pulls over the car, and he goes, "It's time to take the sacrament." And that's when I got nervous, because I was like, like you said, there's not strains, but it's different every time and for everybody. And I was like, what if I think that I'm this, like, I think that I'm wired for it. I think I can handle it. But there's also sometimes, sometimes it can't talk. Like sometimes it's hard to make a complete sentence on it. Sometimes, like who knows what could go wrong. But I don't want that to have to be with him. Like I don't want. And he goes, "Let's start off with just one drop." And as you and all my friends know, if someone turned to me and said, "Let's start off with one drop," I'd be like, "I thought we were gonna do this. What? Like, why have a cocktail? What are we gonna do? I'd rather take too much than too little, but not that day. So I was like, okay, one drop, great. And he turns around and he takes the dropper and the whole dropper goes in my mouth. He goes, "That's one drop for you." And I remember thinking, on the one hand, I prepared my whole life for this moment, right? On the other hand, I've texted my friend Nappy, and I was like, "If you don't hear from me," I was like, "This, just happened." And I was like, because honestly, like, you don't know, like, maybe what they were doing was different than what we're getting. Maybe it was stronger. Maybe, and that's not the case. I mean, it's a chemical where as long as you're getting the surgic acid, it's the same thing. It might have different fingerprints and feel a little differently. And as you said, I feel like your body chemistry reacts to it differently, maybe, but it's not like.
So how was the acid? Did you felt like you had taken LSD like it before?
I did. It was very strong, but it also was a matter of quantity. We stopped at a rest stop along the way before we got to the hike, and I just like that. Everyone had this all had, square head. They all look like they're square head. And I start laughing, and Billy comes out of the restrooms. He's doubled over and laughing. And that's when I knew it was going to go well. An hour or two, maybe, a few hours later, we're on the side of this cliff exposed to the sun. And the sun's so hot coming down. And he's going, "I don't know if I'm going to make it." And me going, "I don't think so either." And I had this, I had a backpack. And I'm not really, a volcanic hiker, so I don't know what to prepare with. And so I brought a complete rookie move. I had a can of coconut water, but a can. So once you open it, you have to drink it. It's open. Not like a candy, anything you can close. The sun's pouring down. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna die I'm gonna be dehydrated. All this, and then 10 feet apart away from us was the canopy, the jungle canopy, where you go in and all of a sudden we end up at this waterfall, and we got naked and went swimming, and it was like being at the Garden of Eden. But and then as the sun's setting, and everything was very pastelish. And as the sun is setting, and I'm realizing like it really did break down the barriers between us, because he was no longer the drummer from the Grateful Dead. This band that I've listened to since I was 16 and changed my life and trajectory of my life, and it had all these ripple effects as well. Fish wouldn't have existed without the Grateful Dead. None of these bands would have. None of these bands would have, and certainly my life would have been very different without them. All that went away. And also even just the fact that here's my new boss, and all, like, is he gonna like me? All that goes out the window. We're naked and underneath a waterfall, seeing rainbows, and he's looking at me going, "How do we get back to the Jeep? I don't know. And if we don't get back to the Jeep before dark, it could be bad." And then he goes, "But you know what?" He's like, "I always get in these situations, and somehow I improvise and I get out of them." And that's when it just was hit me. I was like, "Oh, okay. You and I, we're the same. We're fine. We're humans. We all do the same." And on the hike out, he was going through this thing out loud. The whole thing of, he's like, "I'm getting older and being able to hike out, and oh my God, like I'm getting old." Like he was going through all the psychological things you do when you're on psychedelics out loud. And again, that's when, and I looked at him and go, "We can do more of these things, right?" and that's when he looked at me. He goes, "You're one of us." And I was like, "No, you're one of us."
Classic.
And then I thought about it. I was like, actually, I'm one of his. Like he's right. He's like he's the first. He's one of the pioneers with that sort of thing.
You're right, but we're all mining the same farm.
Yeah. Yeah, and it breaks down all those, man, it really breaks down all those barriers. You know, there's no more separation, no more of like he's the rock star, I'm the right. It was, you know, you see people's essence.
Well, it's amazing that now LSD is this respectful, it's respectable. You know,
I
that
know.
it has its own documentary with all these celebrities like Sting and all these young people talking about how great LSD is, which, you know, people didn't want to be associated with that stuff back in the day. It was like a scourge.
Well,
You know, they would say you were insane.
There's a big separation. I was thinking about it in terms of I was thinking about it not too long ago when Trey first came to the Fare Thee Well rehearsals, and Billy and him had a really funny exchange, and I was there for all of their exchanges. You know, sometimes and sometimes as an active participant, sometimes just as a fly on the wall. And you know, Billy knew that Trey was sober and how important it was to Trey to be sober, and also for us, it was a big part of my job was to keep the environment sober, including not keeping Billy sober, but keeping him from participating or partaking in anything around visibly, and or having, you know, and by anything I don't mean anything big. I just mean like, you know, if he was gonna smoke, if it wasn't, he couldn't light it. At one point I had actually had to take Mickey Hart. His manager wasn't Howard wasn't around at the moment. He was, you know, in the building, but it wasn't present. And Mickey went to light up a joint, and I remember being like, Mickey, come here, we got to go outside. You know, like it was just respecting, you know, like you would do for anybody. But at one point, Billy said that Billy and Trey were talking, and they were talking about Red Rocks, and Trey was actually talking about our book, because the one mistake you have in the book is I listed the wrong year when Billy sat in with Fish. It was the only thing I didn't fact check, because
Which
I
was
was like,
09, right?
Yeah, 09. I said 10, because if I know this, I don't need fact check it, and of course I was off by a year. And so I mentioned that to Trey, and Trey's like, when I read that, he's like, I didn't notice even when I read that, because he had read the book on the way to the rehearsals. But then he and Billy started talking about Red Rocks, and you know, he turned from me talking about the book to turning to Billy, and he said, and the first time I was ever at Red Rocks was to see Fish, but I didn't tell that to Trey. But Trey turned to Billy and said, the only reason I even heard of Red Rocks was when I was in school, was my friends and I we piled into my friend's little VW, and we drove all the way out to Red Rocks to see the Grateful Dead. And Trey said, I took, you know, sometimes you end up with Al, you end up, you can take, you know, a little bit goes a long way, and sometimes you misjudge. And Trey looked at Billy and goes, I misjudged, and I was at Red Rocks seeing the Grateful Dead, and I turned around and I looked up and I saw those rocks, and they were animals. They were, you know, like they were reptiles. And then behind, and he said this to Billy as if Billy had never been there. He goes, and then behind you guys where you're playing, there was these rocks, and as a backdrop, and the rocks were turning into these giant menacing creatures, and I was worried for Jerry's life. So, yeah.
Which he should have been.
Which he should have been, yeah.
We all should have been. You know what? A crazy substance, you know, but it's amazing now. Everybody's microdosing. Everybody's hip. Everybody's ketamine, now ketamine therapy. I mean, these are all the therapeutics now that people are using to you know, MDMA for post-stress, PTSD has been very successful with soldiers and with people that have lost children and stuff like that. I mean, the world is finally coming around, it seems, karmically, where these are these substances that are people used to be a scourge, but now they're the medicines that are healing us.
Well, I think so too. Going back to my point with Trey was that since then I've read in interviews with him, you know, in removed interviews, I've read that somebody and I forget where it was, but they brought up you know, they brought up acid and they brought up weed, and Trey kind of, you know, and Trey's completely sober, of course, and it's very important to him. It's a part of his identity now. But he did make the distinction between, he said, look, he didn't get into trouble with drugs or alcohol until certain drugs came into play. But before then, you know, I think what we're going to do as a society is we're going to have the separation. Like, you know, I heard some podcast or something months ago, but that stuck with me where I don't remember the context, but I remember the info, the bit was drugs themselves are not bad. A drug isn't bad. It's how you use it that's good or bad, that determines if it's good or bad. Oxycontin was developed for my mom, my dying mother on her deathbed took Oxycontin as for a medicinal reason that was very real. And I remember at the time too, this was at the very beginning of the Oxy epidemic in this country. And I remember when she was prescribed it, my eyes going and me being like, oh, I've heard of that. I know what that is. And my mom, who's completely she never did any drug her whole life. Maybe she tried weed once in college, that. But I knew what she was being prescribed, and that was a good use of it, but there's, I think that, there's cannabis and there's psychedelics, and then there are the drugs that are, the opiates.
Yeah, and ultimately the use and abuse, and I believe the company's Purdue, isn't it? The pharmaceutical company that's now $8 billion in debt because of, and they're going to have to close and they can't make OxyContin. I heard the U.S. government now wants to claim them as an asset today. That was one of the things that I heard on the news. But it's the same thing with Quaaludes. Quaaludes were amazing, but people abused them. And if you needed them for medicine, they're great. But at a certain point, people abuse everything. The problem with the opiates is they were making so much money on them, and they were making way more than we needed as a society, and dumping them in our markets and creating problems because doctors wanted to prescribe them. So it became a real issue. I mean, and there is a line, I believe, I would call them the Satan drugs and the God drugs.
Yeah, there's drugs that enhance your life.
Touch. And there's certain things that shut you off. The canes, the lidocaine, novocaine, cocaine, they numb you. I mean, they're numbers. They're made to kill the feelings and dead ends. And then stuff like marijuana and LSD and ecstasy are things that enhance and open up and create clarity. Because let's face it, there's a lot of shit dumped on us when we're young, from our parents, from our religion, from our friends, from our school, that we have to process ourselves. And I think the best way to process it is, here, people are helping me with my terminology. Yes, that's entheogens. Yes. But interesting question. Dave K makes an interesting thing. Now, Billy and those guys did some incredibly strong LSD at a time when it was being developed, at a time when nobody really knew their dosage. And when it was
legal.
Right, but then you would get it from Sandoz, and you'd get these little packets in, and you'd order they would ship it from Switzerland, right? The Swiss, back in the day. But people like Sid Barrett, and on another, our friend from what the hell is his name, Mike from the Beach Boys.
Brian
Wilson. Brian Wilson.
Brian Wilson, yes. Who he's definitely a casual.
Brian Wilson lost his fucking marbles.
Yeah, he has.
How much LSD does it take? Because think about Billy's done a fucking shitload of LSD and never lost his marbles.
Because I don't think it's the drug. I think it's the user. And I think that what I've read, and I don't know, I'm no expert in this area of it, but what I have read in the past is that drugs like LSD and psychedelics, they can exacerbate and they can bring out, if you have schizophrenic tendencies or if you're borderline something, they can bring that out. And they certainly, I mean, look, they can shape personalities. It shaped my personality. Like me taking psychedelics in boarding school, 100% shaped my personality, and my life to follow. And so I can only imagine that for some people, and who's to say? I mean, there are people to say, and I'm not one of them, but they're experts on it. But I think that, I don't believe that that psilocybin or LSD, or most of the anything in the psychedelic class could necessarily, have this switch where you become a casualty. You're not going to be. I remember in high school, before my first, foray into psychedelics, being taught that, if you take acid or any of these psychedelics, you might end up in jail thinking that you're a couch, or thinking that you're a carrot, and that's fear mongering. That's exaggeration of the truth.
Well, that's like when they said masturbation makes hair grow on your palms, and all my friends would be like this.
Yeah, same thing.
They're not hairy. Look.
And when they said that cannabis leads to sets, promiscuous sets, awesome.
And here's your latest prodigy, our good friend DJ Williams. He's been on the show.
Love that guy.
DJ.
Love that guy. Yeah.
He just had a birthday, I believe.
He did. You know, one of the people that I miss the most seeing in person is DJ.
And incredible talent. I mean,
oh yeah. And we got things planned, man. DJ's musical mind is so unbelievable, and he's got a lot of music in him. He's got a singular voice and style. You come to all the shows that went in LA.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. The last time I saw him at the Mint, I was so blown away by his approach and what he's laying down, and the mixing of the rock and the funk and the dance and the party. And I was just like, DJ's got the party vibe, make you just rock out all night.
And shots fired in 20, I would have said 2020, and shots fired in 2021. He's got some music in the can, some Colored Red stuff coming out.
Right, he's got the whole thing he did with the Western theme, with the cereals.
Yep, and I think we're gonna do some live streams soon. He didn't want to do live streams at first because he didn't want to, broadcast from his living room just guitar. He wants it to be the full shots fired experience. But now that we can do that, we're talking about doing that, and it's gonna be really cool. I'm excited.
Hard times to manage talent.
Yeah, right.
A lot of it's like, don't jump.
Yeah,
not today.
I had
next month.
I mean, I had so many with DJ, with Reed Mathis, and with Billy and the Kids. We had so much planned. We were gonna, headline Stone Roses. We were gonna headline one night at Peach Fest. We had so much planned, and now it's and then we've had live streams planned that we've had to cancel and stuff like that because Billy's in Hawaii, and we're kind of playing the waiting game.
It's unbelievable. It's a shot across our bow. They took everything that was fun and just like stopped it. I was just like, whoa, I'm not seeing my friends. I'm on a bunch of group chats and we're all talking, and it's just the hardest thing ever not to see each other all this time. It's not like we actually like each other. I think we're just used to seeing each other a lot.
Yeah. I mean, group chats are important, and I think all of those things. But I mean, it's definitely an interesting time. I like you said in the very beginning, we're reassessing and we're regrouping. In the case of a lot of bands, as I told actually DJ on the phone this past week, I think that when music comes back, it's going to be a huge wave. It's going to everything's gonna be lifted up because all the people that were jaded, that were like, I don't need live music and I'm busy, I'm gonna have pizza and watch The Bachelor tonight. All those people are gonna be buying tickets, and wanting.
Well, I thought that's gonna be the problem, is that there's not gonna be a place big enough to hold everybody. And we got some good news yesterday from Pfizer with the pricks. They're going to give us the vaccine needles that should be able to, But what I heard was 25 million, and they're going to go to other people besides the United States. At first, it's like they're going to have $1 billion, and they're going to give them out to everybody for free. And springtime, we're going back to normal. And then I hear the news. It's like 25 million. They're going to everybody in the world. First people to get are going to be responders, not fucking wooks.
Yeah, but I do think though it's a matter of time, because that if and other companies that are concurrently creating their own vaccines, I mean, this isn't the new normal for good. This is still, it's been a long time. It's been way longer when we thought it was only about 2 weeks or a month. It's been way longer than any of us thought, and it's going to continue longer than any of us think, maybe even now, but it's not going to be forever. And when it comes back, it'll be great. And in the meantime, you advertise this, you use the word gonzo in the thing, and it's funny because there's been 2 comparisons my whole life that I've kind of been trying to outrun, and the one's been Cameron, when I first started with Rolling Stone, and everyone's like, oh, you're like the Almost Famous kid, and I hated that because of course there's no comparison there other than one affiliation. But the gonzo thing I've gotten since before I think I even published anything in writing, was, everyone's like, oh, you're so gonzo. And I got that term a lot, and I tried to counter it by saying benzo, But Benzo, of course, has a different connotation.
That's for sure.
It's like that's not my gig at all. And so it's like, but I have been thinking about Hunter S. The past few weeks for a reason, and that's that I don't see any comparison. But one thing that people forget about him is that when he wrote Fear and Loathing, he wrote that in the middle of the night as his way to wind down from him covering the race riots that were happening
the race riots, right? Yes.
Yeah, the race riots and something else. There was something specific, and I forget what it was, but it was violence in L.A. Right? And he was covering it, and he was talking to some dangerous people, and he was worried for his life at some points, and and doing that, and he was writing Fear and Loathing as his Fear and Loathing. He took that weekend, and happened during that weekend. He took that weekend to go out to Las Vegas to get away from it for just a minute. But he was a political guy first and foremost, and eventually, had a political career of his own, but also wrote about it. And Fear and Loathing on the campaign trail. And, he used to have allegedly had all these TVs on different stations all at once. And that's been my life the past week for sure. The past few months in the beginning of the pandemic, it was nonstop news about the pandemic. And then now I've turned into a political news junkie where I'm glued to it. For 4 years, I've been saying that this exact thing that we're in right now is going to happen. The minute that Trump won, I said that there goes our next election. He's going to steal that.
Well, he's going to try, but he has no basis to steal it. The only way he can do it is by force.
Well, that and also the electors that's what scares me is that the electors, when they vote, they are not beholden to their state's popular vote.
It's going to be a 306 to 223 going into that count. So you're swaying 80 electorates not to vote at a very fractious time when our very democracy, our very democracy is called into action. So we are watching if the electors are going to be pulled out of their beds and their skin peeled off of them in their house. I think that if the revolution is going to come, it's going to come. But I have the best faith in our system to work. And I know that Joe Biden has good people around him. And, let's face it, everybody knows what the count is.
And the court of public opinion can't be underestimated. And that when the court of public opinion, worldwide went for Biden on Saturday, and that was the first time that I had hope. It wasn't when he won the 270. I knew that he, I thought for months that he would cross that. It was what happens then. Trump's going to try to steal it. But Saturday was the first time that I thought, you know what? He can't. He can try. And he will.
He can try. And you know what? Saturday was not a good day if you think about Trump, he's so sensitive. And basically everybody was holding up signs to his motorcade. You're fired. Get out. Yeah, I know. And that shit gets to him. He's really thin skinned. And that's one of the reasons he's probably digging in. He's like, I'll teach these people a lesson. They want to get rid of me. The last thing they're going to do is get rid of me.
He'll go down kicking and screaming. And also my other fear is that he's going to set up the beginning of the Biden presidency. The last time that a president went and hobbled was George
FDR.
W. Well, George W. kind of went and hobbled, and then 9/11 happened. And I remember them saying that the transition wasn't the smoothest, and I remember them thinking like America was in a weak position because the George W. Bush's administration was just getting up to speed.
Right, because one of the things that's happening is right now what happens when they pick the president and they agree that there's going to be a transfer of power, he already starts getting the daily briefings, the security briefings and stuff like that. So he's up to speed with what's going on. So when he rolls in January 20th, he's not sidelined with all this stuff. Trump wants to scorch some earth for sure, and he definitely doesn't want to make it easy. But, I'm hoping that Melania and Jared can talk some sense in him because Donnie and Eric sure aren't.
Well, I don't know if anyone will talk sense in him, but we can hope. But yeah.
We can only pray, and it's so depressing. We had such a great talk today, Benji. It was a fucking great conversation, and then we started talking about politics. It's like fuck.
Well, yeah. Well, let's turn it around for 1 second because there's one story I wanted to tell you. You asked me to think about some stories, and I thought about them. I have a million that I could tell, but I'll tell this one for a specific reason. Well, there's one about Billy and I being too high at an airport that I thought was, for some reason, I've never told it, and it was the one that I immediately thought of. But the Gonzo thing, it was when I saw your Instagram and it's, Gonzo journalism. And I thought, again, it's that comparison that I've always tried to avoid. But on the other hand, then I thought there was one time in which I intentionally did something, where I was like, this, Hunter would be proud. And that's that as I have these multiple hats. I'm an artist manager and I manage these bands and a writer and all these other things. But for the journalist hat, sometimes, especially when I was a regular for Rolling Stone, you get, people want to give you these experiences because they hope that you write about them. And so I would get all these invitations and people would fly you out. People like in Cloud9 would host me at those at jam crews and holidays, and even Atlantic City. Your old stomping ground. The tourism board of Atlantic City had me spend a wonderful weekend there on them, hoping that I'd write about why you should spend your vacation at Atlantic City years ago. But I got this call one day from my friend Claire Parr, who, whenever she calls me, it's always for some amazing opportunity that she's hoping that maybe I'll write about, and I don't know how she gets these gigs, but she becomes a headhunter for these amazing gigs and connecting the dots. And so she called me and she said, listen, I don't know what you're doing tomorrow, but I need you. It was like some ungodly hour of the morning, like 10 a.m. ungodly for me, where she's like, I need you to go to the Sears racetrack. And we're going to put you in an Indy car, and you're going to go over 100 miles per hour. You'll be a passenger. There are 2 seats. You'll be a passenger, and you're going to go over 100 miles per hour. I want to introduce you to IndyCar racing because the Indy 500 had been rebranding. They had EDM artists, I think maybe even bass nectar, play in their pit. And they're trying to attract a new demographic and a new audience. And so they thought, let's have a Rolling Stone writer here and see if he can do a story. And I kept on thinking, I'll do it because it sounds cool, but I don't know if there's a story there. And, I was reading about it the night before, and they wanted to introduce a lot of you're half robot at that point. And they have all these, the technology behind it definitely deserves an article in Wired. I'm not the guy for that article, though. So I kept on thinking, I do emotional connection pieces. So I was like, what could I do? And I was like, well, I know what Hunter S. Thompson would do. So I decided, you know what? I'm gonna fuck it. I'll do it. So they're gonna put me in a race car. I may or may not write about it. I'm not obligated to do anything except have this experience. I'm going to get a little bit electric and just and not tell anybody, but get a little bit electric and see how it goes and just see what happens during this day. And I get there, and as we said earlier, a little bit goes a long way, and I wanted a micro, and it wasn't quite a micro, right? And I, immediately they put me in a flame retardant suit, and that's when the fear and the loathing started kicking in. And then they said to me, I remember thinking, like, was this a good idea? And also, like, how safe is this? And then they told me that the person who was going to be driving me was Mario Andretti. And I know nothing about race cars, but I know the name Mario Andretti. Like, it's like, it's like the Tony Hawk or the Kelly Slater, the Michael Jordan of race car driving. He's the one guy that if I don't know anything about race car driving, I know nothing except what I learned that day. And Mario Andretti, his name. And I met him very briefly, and I remember going and being a little scared and being like, "You're driving, right?" And then I felt safe because he's like one of the most famous race car drivers in the world. So I'm like, well, he's not gonna crash on everything's fine. It's like being in a roller coaster. And of course, it was fun going around 100 plus miles per hour. There's no punchline there other than the fact that I did it. Then afterwards they paraded me around. And I had with me a Hunter S. Thompson pin just as my little nod to what I was doing secretly. And it was really funny because every one of those guys on the racetrack all mentioned the pin and all said they had an affinity for Hunter S. Thompson because he had an affinity for racing, which I didn't know.
Yeah, no, but the mid 400 is one of the races.
Right. No, I knew that. Yeah. I knew the mid 400, of course. Yeah. And he was going to cover that for Sports Illustrated. Yeah.
Unbelievable, Benji. Well, thanks for coming on and visiting with us. We've been friends a long time. It's nice to sit and catch up for us to catch up because we haven't talked.
Yeah, we haven't talked.
Okay.
The last time we saw each other was on a beach in a different country.
Yeah.
It was in Mexico, and I remember it vividly, and my memory sucks, but I remember it was right before the last show on the beach when we were walking into the venue, and we had some turmeric, and yeah.
The orange sunshine back in circulation. Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
All these chemicals come back. Like I was shocked when they were like, "Yeah, this is the orange sunshine." I'm like, "How does that work? How do you preserve a chemical for 50 years?"
Yeah,
but,
I don't know, but I'm glad that there are people that do know.
Hey,
but yeah, the last time I saw you was joyous though. It was great.
And you know what I was thinking about Mexico? I'm like, we could do that again in COVID. People are going to Mexico right now. I mean, I know there's a lot of cases. I don't think Fish would do it, but we could do it. I
don't think Fish would do it. No, I think Fish is going to be, like Dead and Company. I think that they're going to be very, very careful about how they do this. And when I don't see them doing a summer tour. It's too early to say. A lot can happen. Under the current conditions, obviously they won't. Maybe this Pfizer announcement changes things.
Well, if they get the doses and if there's enough doses by that time for everybody that's going and everything else.
But then do you have to prove that you got it before you go? And also the forum, like outdoor shows are one thing, and you can do, but they also can't reduce the capacity. They're already sold out.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a real fuck when things get back together because I think like you said earlier in the show, everybody that's been, no, I'm going to do my hair and no, I got to feed the dog tonight. They're all going to be fuck yeah, I want to go to a show because everybody's all pent up. We're pent up for 8 months. We want to rock out. I think the only way to really enjoy life maybe is to go where the COVID isn't. Like places down and people are having fun in Tulum. There's the art festival down there this weekend coming up that my friend Laura Kimpton's adding art to and stuff like that. So
I know Laura. She's great.
Yeah, she's down there right now putting up her art on the beach, and they're getting ready to do a whole EDM festival. They've cut it down from EDM to like an arts festival, cut down the capacity and stuff. But I think the bands that we love, because there's so many layers of lawyering up, and when you're dealing with promoters like Live Nation and AEG and stuff like that, they can't mess around. If you do it with an independent promoter in a place like we know what's happening in Florida now, the clubs are capacity. Everybody's out everywhere. Texas and Tennessee, Broadway's going off in Nashville. Texas is firing. I mean, they have a lot of cases, but they're still running their businesses like nothing's going on, where places like New York City are getting ready to go back into some semblance of a lockdown. The numbers are up throughout the whole country. I mean, we're in crazy time.
Are you going out? Are you?
I did a socially distanced jam at my friend's house last weekend for about 50 people, including the 10 guys with the band and helping the crew. Everybody was tested when they got there. Everything was outside. Everybody had plenty of room. It was a huge piece of property. And, we played 2 sets. It was beautiful. People were like, this is the first music I've seen in 8 months. And I feel being in California that we can do those things. These rapid tests, the rapid tests are the way to hang out in the groups.
One of my favorite nights of the past of 2020 has been when I went to our friend, yours and mine, Jordan's Front the Rona fast. I think she may have even borrowed your PA that we were using there. But I put together a band that now is probably going to end up playing a lot more shows together. It was, I knew that when I was putting it together, I was like, this will be a beta test, but it was Adam McDougall from Circles Around the Sun and Chris Robinson Brotherhood, Reed Mathis, and John Lavero from the Higgs, local LA boy, and Wally Ingram was on drums. And it was so phenomenal. And a big part of it was, I remember, I never ever get up. I don't get up on stage to announce the band, to MC. It's very rare that I do that. But I remember getting up for the encore because they had already encored and they weren't going to play anymore. And I remember getting up there to try to force them to do one more. And it wasn't one of these, does everyone want to hear one more? It was, I needed it. I was like, it had been 7 months since I saw live music, and they played so phenomenally that they did this help on the way, and the Slipknot and the I Am Hydrogen, and the Slipknot into in the, in the
They had
Fire
a
in the
lot of
Mountain.
fun. Well,
They had a lot of fun.
Jordan's been doing a great job. She has 2 more events coming up. My band played Jordan's house one night. She has a great setup out back there.
And it feels safe. It feels safe.
Yeah, it feels
Everybody
good
gets tested.
when people are tested, and now the tests are coming in. They're a little bit cheaper, but I think this is a good way. Like I saw everybody's like, oh, Thanksgiving has to be indoors. I think everybody needs to rapid test everybody that's coming to their house so they can feel comfortable, because you can't have Thanksgiving outdoors on the East Coast. I mean, right now it's 72 degrees in New York today, which is kind of crazy. They've had an amazing week of weather, but it's usually chilly, so people have to bundle up. Anyway, we're going to figure it all out. And I know music is coming back eventually. It's just a matter of time before we are having fun again. But it's just been really painful. And we've been able to stop and catch our breath and circle our wagons and get our energy together, for what's coming next, and hopefully a brand new day. So
circle our wagons. I haven't heard that expression. Did you make that expression up?
You never heard of that?
Circle our wagons.
Circle the wagons. That's like an old Western. Whenever the Indians were coming, you had to circle the wagons, and then you would fight from in the circle. You'd create a fort by circling the wagons. So
you know what? That's amazing. That's amazing. That's the second expression. The other expression, and this one I knew, but I brought it back today, was dollars for donuts. I bet you dollars for donuts.
Yeah, well, that shows you
how wagons. I'll have to remember that. Yeah.
Thank you, Benji. Thanks for coming on. Good catching up. Stay safe. I look forward to seeing you soon.
You too, my friend. Okay, all right. I'll see you later, Jeff. Thanks.
The one and only Benjy Eisen. Dave, I see your question here. So the Orange Sunshine was mic'd at $250 each to recreate the way it was made in the 60s and put on turmeric and pressed into these little kind of turmeric things. So naturally, I took half because that's what my friend said. And I told my friend, Mark, last name deleted right there. Don't take the whole thing, take a half. If you need half, you try it. I'm in the middle of it. We're at J-Rad in New Orleans. I'm in the middle of just having the best time of my life. I'm like, whoa, I'm so glad I took a half. And all of a sudden, my friend Mark comes behind me and pushes me really hard. And he's like, what the fuck? I've never done anything like this. This is the strongest thing I've ever done. What the fuck? You should have told me to take a half. I was like, I told you 10 times, take a half. What'd you do? He goes, I took the whole thing. Oh my God, I'm losing my mind. So you asked me what the difference is between the fluff. The Orange Sunshine was so clean, so psychedelic. It was like nothing I've ever done before. So I can't even compare it to the fluff. It's freaking amazing. But it's out. The Orange Sunshine is back. And it is. And let me tell you, I've given it to some other people that I know. And some younger folks told me that 5 of them lost their minds on one. And one of the ways we were doing it was dropping him in a bottle of water and shaking it up and then just, passing around shots. And I saw 6 or 7 people get high on a bottle of water and still this much water left in them. So, if you can get some of that stuff, get on the Orange Sunshine, crack it up. Speaking of Orange Sunshine and crack, we got sponsors. Grady's Cold Brew Kit. I got a 20% off code for you guys for Grady's right here. 420 Live. Go to Grady'sColdBrew.com, 420 Live. You can get 20% off on your order of Grady's Cold Brew. It is delicious. It comes in this handy bag where you can make your own. This is a standard now in my house. My girls are all hopped up on the Grady's. It comes with New Orleans style chicory, so you don't have to add sugar, or you just maybe. I use monk fruit sweetener. I don't know about you guys, how advanced you are in your sweeteners, but I've gone past the stevia and the xylitol and all the other crap into monk fruit, which is an ancient Chinese secret. So add some monk fruit to your bean bag here, your Grady's bean bag, and you can be an investor in Grady's too, which is really cool. And our other folks I want to tell you about is Sinlawn Lawn Care and Toupees, making the greatest. If you go on Sinlawn's site, you can get a 5-foot by 7-foot roll. There's a contest right now. You enter the contest, you will get entered in for the roll, and then I am going to pick from our entries someone to win an 11 by 14 print. So you're going to win. One of my viewers is going to win a print by going on Sinlawn and filling out the Sinlawn.com. I kind of like it like this, right? That looks good. I mean, come on. If you're going to get a toupee, get something that's really kicks it up, folks. Sinlon.com/420live. Get on it. Enter the contest for 11. Enter the contest. And by entering the contest, you'll get entered into my contest for an 11x14. Grady's, you just get 20% off. No photo for the Grady's, but you get good coffee. So there you go, folks. Thank you so much. Wow, we're over an hour today. Thank you, Benj, for keeping us engaged, rapping, talking, and just like, I love talking about the Grateful Dead. I love talking about fish. I love talking about drugs. So we hit on all my fucking favorite topics today with Benji. Benji's like, what are we going to talk about? And I'm like, we'll figure it out. And that's what I really like, because we can just figure it out here, catch up with our friends. There's nothing serious. There's nothing. It's all for fun. We're here for fun. And we're going to be back tomorrow. Listen to this, the next 5 days. Tomorrow we have Scotty Upshaw, Shane O'Brien, 2 former hockey players that are on they're doing a podcast right now. These guys are hilarious. They're old friends of mine, huge music lovers. I met them at Bonnaroo. We hung out at Outside Lands. They love music. They love a good puff, or they did anyway back in the day. I don't want to speak for them. Thursday, we are going to be Hal and Rain. Ethan Miller is going to be our guest. We're going to talk about music. Ethan has some new music out. We're going to talk about that. Friday, we are going to talk to Paul Peck, David Foster from Fest Productions down in New Orleans, and our good friend Ben Ellman from Galactic and one of the owners of Tipitinas for the Save Tipitinas Foundation this Saturday. They have an amazing day of music lined up to save Tipitinas. Are you ready for this, folks? On Friday night, I'm shooting a secret opening of Prince Street Pizza here in Los Angeles. If you don't know what Prince Street Pizza is, I'm sorry, but doesn't mean you're not spending enough time in New York. This legendary chain has finally opened up in New York, in Los Angeles, with the deep dish, nice grandma Sicilian slice. And we'll be shooting the opening of that. And on Monday, we're going to have Dom and his dad on, the founders and the proprietors of Prince Street Pizza. We're going to go to the pizzeria. We're going to eat some pizza on the air. We're going to talk to the guys who created it all. And on Tuesday, we're going to talk to our friends from NITO, National Independent Theater Owners. Our friends that are all struggling in the music business. We're going to talk to them and see what they're doing and how they're going to survive. So when it's time to rock, we are fucking ready. And I think the rapid testing is the way to go to get those clubs open too. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. You guys completely. It was so much fun talking to Benji today. I just love talking about the things that drive us, our passions. That's what we're all about here, talking about the things we love, talking about the things that drive us. You know, I appreciate all you guys tuning in for the past 172 shows today. I'm keeping count now every day because we're coming up to 200. And for the 200 show, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to plots right here on the air. Peace, love, happiness to everybody out there. Here's the hug. God boner for all you guys out there. Thank you. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you so